This pandemic has created challenges unlike most of us have experienced. But for people who struggle with addiction, this pandemic has become what experts call a national relapse trigger. Tim Bowles runs Recovery is Happening, a place where people in recovery get support. He has stayed open and allowed in-person meetings even as everything was shut down last spring and throughout the entire year. He lined me up with a series of his folks in recovery who you'll hear from in the next 10 days leading into the new year. They found sobriety either right before the pandemic hit or in the early months. Many started through Tom Trzynski's program at Teen Challenge. And at the end of this series, you'll hear for the first time Tom's incredible personal journey to becoming a rehab facility director and what happened on the day his father died when Tom was only 13 years old. As we near the end of 2020, many of us celebrating Christmas and the holidays differently this year. My hope is that this series of interviews will inspire people to find and give the gift of recovery. Tim Bowles is the Director of Treatment at Recovery is Happening. There are a lot of different issues that I want to get to, Tim, but we are really focusing on the positive, those who are staying in recovery throughout this pandemic and how hard it is. But the fact that you continued to do the face-to-face meetings, even in a pandemic, speaks a lot, because all the folks that we're going to be hearing from are saying that that support is what's kept them sober.
I just think face-to-face is the way that treatment's always meant to be, and I've said this before, but a lot of magic happens in a group room full of people when light bulbs come off and empathy is shown and active listening skills are learned, and you're basically all sitting around together going through this process, long process of recovery. And it's just been really, really nice to see the appreciation from the folks that I work with and how grateful they are that with all the things that have been taken away, that this is something that they've been able to kind of glom onto or hang their hat on to help them through the early struggles of recovery.
And the early struggles of recovery are the worst, the hardest, and staying sober is, it has to be about the support. It absolutely has to. We keep talking about the rates of addiction, overdoses that are happening just in the last 9 to 10 months. It has been very eye-opening, very sad. That's why I wanted to tell the good stories about this. And the folks with Recovery is Happening, I have to imagine, right now being around the holidays, this is going to be really different for the people who we're going to hear from.
Yeah, I think a lot of families are looking forward to, believe it or not, looking forward to, even if it's just intimate gatherings of immediate family, having a person that has been lost throughout some past holidays. They've been either non-communicative or not available, and now they're going to be part of that. This is where you can put a nice bow at the end of 2020.
That's the time when people like to get together and be festive, if you want to call it that. Yeah. But when addicts, I have to imagine, struggle more because of the emotion that comes with the holidays, the loneliness, and then having addiction problems that go so very, very deep. What types of things do you talk about? What kind of support? It's one thing to have a listening ear, but for people who are listening who've never really gone into any kind of recovery, who've struggled with addiction, what would they expect?
Well, for one, there's always been there's a lot of pieces to put together. And there's a lot of guilt and shame by the addict as well. Once they start getting well, you brought up the emotion part, and emotion is something that they've been numbing for many, many years, and now we're putting them into a family situation where they might be walking a little bit on eggshells. So it's nice to let family members know that try to be yourselves. Don't try to, you don't have to walk on eggshells either. That's why we do family education groups leading into a lot of different holidays, not just this one, but I did one last month before Thanksgiving, and now we're doing another one with a smaller group before Christmas to talk about some of the some of the stigmas and some of the, educate the family members a little bit about, bringing this kind of scared, anxious person in early recovery back into the fold. And what are some things that we can do to make them feel welcome? What do we do about alcohol in the house? What do we do about, some of the issues that happened at previous Christmases that we never really needed to deal with because they weren't available. We talk about that kind of stuff, and we educate. This is a family disease, so we need to educate all the family members. So let's give them a little grace. Let's give the family some grace, and let's just learn how to do this kind of all over from scratch again. It takes education, and it takes a lot of love.
Before the break, you heard a piece of my conversation recently with Tim Bowles, director at Recovery is Happening. He kept his doors open for in-person group support meetings for those recovering from addiction in this pandemic. It is no easy feat, and it is vital to those he helps. Almost every family has this issue in it. Honest to God, everybody I talk to has someone who has been an alcoholic, a user. People are finding with the prescription pain medication, they were never addicts before. They never had an issue with substance abuse. And now all of a sudden, this is something brand new. We're in a time, because of this pandemic, where isolation is important. People have to quarantine. People have to stay away from large gatherings and support systems. Families who already are estranged because of addiction, how do you do this? This is so very difficult.
Yeah, which is exactly why I stayed open, because I saw the writing on the wall. I don't want to flog a dead horse here or anything, but obviously the isolation has led to mental health catastrophes, addiction running rampant, and suicides being way up, overdoses being way up. What is the key to recovery? It's connection. So what we're doing right now, Betsy, is better than nothing. So we're able to connect via a Zoom medium, which is better than nothing. And so we have all those resources to give people, but there are still ways to connect face-to-face. The groups have to be smaller. Yes, isolation is important in quarantine. I currently have somebody right now in my treatment group that has to do Zoom because her daughter tested positive, and so she has to go through that quarantine period as well and take a few tests. I just hook her up on Zoom and put her in the group room, and then I have one group member just kind of pushing the camera over to who's speaking, and she says, this is great compared to what I would have if I was just sitting at home on the couch quarantining in isolation. This gives me some connection. But small face-to-face groups are still available, and they're plentiful if you just have the resources. And that's why we do face-to-face. We do announcements all the time. Hey, this little place right over here, it's having a speaker meeting on Friday night with 10 people. Go to that. The Pioneer Club, the T3, they're still doing meetings. They closed down earlier on, at least the Pioneer did, for 3 months. And you know something, during that 3-month period of time, that's some people that had 25 or 30 years of sobriety. The saddest thing to see is that isolation brought them back to relapse. It's an absolute maddening thing. And I don't think that this is the pandemic within the pandemic, is what I like to call it. Addiction, mental health, suicidality, all of this stuff is what doesn't get talked about when they talk about COVID-19. But the pandemic within the pandemic is, what is this isolation doing to drug addicts and alcoholics that are in early recovery or that rely on the face-to-face meetings for support and for their sobriety? It's crushed a lot of them. And it's sad.